Hey, what's up, guys? Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling, and today we are looking at another pro wrestling tournament and matching it up against the ones we've looked at in the past in our ongoing series, Tournamentality. Easily the worst name for any series in the history of YouTube. We've looked in the past at tournaments from New Japan and WWE, and this week we're going outside and we are looking at AEW, specifically the inaugural AEW TNT title tournament. Now, this was the introduction of the first mid-card belt in AEW, so it had a lot of expectations to live up to, and it had the misfortune of taking place during the dark ages of 2020, meaning there was no crowds in attendance other than the few AEW wrestlers who they had standing at ringside. And really, the lack of noise and investment from the crowd was really apparent throughout this entire tournament and sort of leaves it in this weird void of history. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad tournament. So we had 8 competitors, and we're going to go through all the matches, all 7 matches in the tournament. But really, from the outset, the finalists were never in doubt. Cody Rhodes and Lance Archer had been setting up a feud prior to this tournament even being announced. So those two being put on opposite sides of the bracket, it was made pretty obvious they would be going to the finals at Double or Nothing in 2020. And as a result, a lot of the matches in this tournament sort of lacked drama that tournaments normally thrive on. The excitement of not really knowing who's going to go to the next step and the possibility of fantasy booking different matches as you get further in the tournament. Also, one thing that was weird about this was I watched it exclusively on Fight when I was rewatching it, and since it was during the pandemic, they sort of just stopped wrestling in the commercial breaks. And whereas normally on Fight you have an uninterrupted feed so you can watch the entire match as the crowd does, since there's no crowd, they have no reason to wrestle during the commercial breaks. So the matches sort of just stop whenever they go to commercial. And it's this really weird and jarring way to have matches presented to you. And it's sort of really added to the atmosphere of this being a weird time for pro wrestling, a time unlike any other, and not really in a good way. But we're going to try as little as possible to hold those things against the tournament and really just try to analyze the action and the booking of the tournament as a whole. So let's go ahead and get into our quarterfinal matches. So to start, all the quarter and semifinal matches happened on Dynamite, whereas the finals would take place at Double or Nothing. So really what we're given early on is a lot of TV quality matches, which for Dynamite isn't necessarily a bad thing because their TV production is at such a high quality. But to start, we had Cody Rhodes going up against Shawn Spears, and they had a good match, but not really a great match. Both guys had worked together in the past, and they had a history that in AEW that they could build on of one of Cody's big first feuds in AEW. But the action was a little bit lackluster, and the ending to this match didn't really make sense. Cody had Shawn in the figure 4, and rather than him tapping out, he sort of just... he didn't even pass out, really. He just laid down and got pinned, technically. But afterwards, he was, like, rolling around and selling, so it's not even like he was passed out. It just didn't really make a lot of sense. It was a good match, but pretty skippable, pretty forgettable. Not something I would ever go back and watch, and not something I would recommend you guys go watch if you've never seen it before. And it wasn't necessarily the best way to start the tournament, because with a tournament like this for a mid-card belt, you want to really show a lot of dynamic, awesome action. And this match just didn't do it. The next week on Dynamite, we had Lance Archer versus Colt Cabana, and this was a pretty standard match. Nothing really bad, but nothing really that exciting or good either. The week prior, or a few weeks prior, Lance had a squash match against Marco Stunt. That was like such an amazing match and such an awesome way to introduce Lance Archer. And this follow-up just, I don't think, was very good. Really, in this tournament, you want to try to make Lance Archer seem like the biggest monster you possibly can. And at some points in here, he was almost going 50-50 with Colt. And it just didn't work. It didn't work from a booking sense, and also in ring, it just wasn't amazing. So it was not a good way to push Lance Archer as your big monster in this tournament. The following week, we got our two final quarter matches. The first was Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin. Once again, a good match, not as good as the matches they've had previously, though, or the matches they would go on to have in the future. And this match, more than any other, really suffered from a lack of fans, because there were a lot of big spots in this match, high flying or sort of, those big crowd popping sequences where it's just back, forth, big move, big move. There was a lot of those in this match, but there was no crowd to really get invested in it. And the intensity that both of them showed, the roaring that they did, and Sammy Guevara sticking out his tongue and motioning that he's crazy, it just looked too goofy without fans there to really play off of it. And I don't feel that these guys made enough of an adjustment from a match that they would have in front of fans to a match that they couldn't have in front of fans to really make this match work. So once again, good, nothing really great. Definitely didn't live up to their potential. And our final quarterfinal match, rather, is Dustin Rhodes versus Kip Sabian. And for some reason, they threw a stipulation on this match where if Dustin lost, he was going to quit wrestling, and this was going to be his final match. And with Lance Archer already advancing earlier in the tournament, it was such a surefire decision that Dustin was winning, that any attempt these two made in the match to add a little bit of drama and get some near falls for Kip Sabian, this stipulation just completely sucked it out of it. It was so obvious Dustin was going to win and go on that this match had absolutely no drama to it at all, and was sort of a wet fart of a way to end the quarterfinals. So we made it through the quarterfinals, and really nothing blow away great, just a lot of standard TV matches. So thus far, the tournament doesn't really shape up to be a work rate tournament, but that doesn't necessarily mean it can't be a great tournament depending on the booking. But the semis of this tournament and the booking of the matches really fell through and really did not emphasize the best possible stories that they could have had. And I'm going to start with Cody Rhodes versus Darby Allin, which was a good match, but the booking of it just made absolutely no sense, because going into the finals, Cody's getting to the finals, and he's going to be facing Lance Archer. So the dynamic that you want to set up, and the dynamic that they worked with at Double or Nothing, was Lance as this big, dominant monster who's never been defeated in AEW against Cody, who is the plucky babyface who's going to come from behind and let his never say die spirit carry him to the win. And they just didn't do a good job about setting that up in any of the previous round matches. Like in this match, he went 50-50 with Darby Allin, and if you're trying to make Cody look like the underdog babyface who can win it all, putting him up against a guy who is smaller and more dynamic in the ring, just it completely takes that message away. It makes it fall through. And Cody's character throughout this tournament was so back and forth that there was no real consistency, and he couldn't tell a consistent story throughout the tournament. Imagine this instead. He beat Shawn Spears in the quarterfinals, and then afterwards, Spears attacks him with a chair and maybe goes for his knee or goes for his ribs. So that way, Cody is carrying an injury coming to the semifinals, and rather than facing Darby, he faces Sammy Guevara, who at the time was a heel. And you could have Sammy really target the injured body part of Cody, but ultimately Cody does come up victorious. That way, going into the finals, Cody has a very ingrained character that he is playing. This babyface who is injured but refuses to lose because of his undying heart and spirit. And that is so much of a better dynamic going into this final match with Lance Archer. And I also thought that the other match that they had, which was Lance Archer versus Cody Rhodes in the semifinals, was also just like no good in terms of telling a story. As a match, it was fine. It was probably like 3 stars. But Lance is supposed to be the dominant monster. He is supposed to be Vader. He's supposed to be Bam Bam Bigelow. He's supposed to be Kane. He is supposed to be this force that you don't want to fight, this unstoppable force that now the biggest babyface has to overcome. And they put him in a 20-minute match with Dustin Rhodes, where Dustin, while he does bleed and he does take some offense, it's not like a total squash match, and it's not a total dominating performance from Lance. And they gave Dustin in this match a lot of what they should have given Cody in the final match. And from a booking perspective, putting Dustin against Lance, I think, does work, because it does put a little bit of, oh, what's going to happen? We thought it was going to be Lance versus Cody, but now we could have the Dustin versus Cody rematch instead. And it injects a little bit of that unpredictability into the outcome. But making them go 20 minutes just didn't work for Lance's character. And both characters in this match would have been serviced better if it went like 5, maybe 8 minutes, with Lance really decimating Dustin, only for Dustin to come back in the end and have like one big hot comeback sequence and a near fall, but then Lance come back and puts him away with the blackout. And those 2 booking decisions, I feel like they're so easy and so obvious. I don't feel like smart or insightful for coming up with those ideas, because I feel like they're obvious and what AEW should have done. But for some reason, they just went down this weird route in terms of agenting the matches in the semifinals that completely threw off the tone of the final match. And lastly, we have the finals, Cody Rhodes versus Lance Archer at Double or Nothing. And the thought I had going into this match is this match would be so much better if it was just a match and not the finals of a tournament, because really there's no need for this match to be at the end of the tournament. No guys are carrying injuries through the rest of the tournament. They didn't set up a particularly interesting story by having someone go through the tournament. Really, the interest for this match came from the promos that Cody cut with Jake Roberts on Dynamite and the video packages that they aired about Cody and Lance, all of which you could have done without a tournament. So you get to this final match where the dynamic is just as you would expect it to be, Lance being the dominant one and Cody having to constantly come from behind to ultimately get the win, which he does. And you just didn't need the tournament to do that. It feels like a big waste of time. Now, that being said, I did think this match was easily the best match of the tournament. I thought it was an excellent match, and it was one of the only matches in the tournament that was really able to overcome the void of not having any fans in the arena and still put on a phenomenal match. And maybe phenomenal's overdoing a little bit, but it was a very, very good match. And when you compare it to the other matches you are getting in this tournament, this did feel like a pay-per-view match, whereas everything else was a TV match. So I felt like in terms of just a match, in terms of the in-ring work, it was a worthy end to this tournament, but the booking of it and what led to it sort of felt like, well, we could have just had the match and didn't have to sit through the tournament instead. So my 2 main critiques of this tournament are thus. Firstly, a lot of the matches were not great. They were just standard TV matches you could see on any week of Dynamite, and they didn't do a lot to make the title that they were introducing into the company feel important or really like a big deal. And also, the booking of the tournament made the tournament feel inconsequential. Going into the finals, it felt more that it would have been better just to have this match, because there was no real stories told through the tournament that couldn't have been told in a singular match. And that detracts from the stakes of the other matches, especially when Cody versus Lance is such a surefire shoe-in for the finals. Not having these other story beats really doesn't allow people to get invested into the tournament. And as a result, let's see where we stack it up. So let me just make sure this is in frame. I got a little whiteboard here with our two previous tournaments we've looked at already. The G1 Climax 34 from 2024 at the top, followed behind by King of the Ring 1993, which we said was just below that. And now we have the AEW Inaugural TNT title tournament to throw in there as well. And I think it shouldn't come as a surprise that I am going to put this below King of the Ring at the bottom of the list, because the matches weren't amazing. And even if they were, it didn't really tell a story like King of the Ring 93 did, you know, with Bret Hart going to the finals to face Bam Bam. It didn't have that story, even though it looked like it was set up to have that story. So those are our three so far. G1 34 at the top, followed by King of the Ring 93, and the TNT title tournament at the bottom. And those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on the inaugural AEW TNT title tournament. Please let me know what you guys thought down below. If there's any tournaments you'd like me to review in the future, please also let me know that down below. Some ones I had in mind doing the Cruiserweight Classic. I'm slowly making my way through G127 from 2017, but it's a long process to go through all those matches, but you can expect those videos to be coming out in the future. Also, you can be expecting some Kurt Angle content to come out in the future, because I am going through and watching his catalog of matches to eventually make an every must-see Kurt Angle match video. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment down below. I've been Isaiah from Hot Tag Wrestling, and I'll see you guys next time.